Tony Bennett appeared to be the kindest person in the music industry. He collaborated with everyone from Frank Sinatra to Lady Gaga, but there was a sinister secret hidden behind those happy pictures. He harbored animosity for one singer for decades, and it tormented him every day. Even his closest pals were unaware of the reality. In 2021, when Bennett was dying, he spoke up. This was more than just jealousy on the job. This had been concealed and was bitter and personal for more than half a century. On August 3, 1926, Anthony Dominic Benedetto was born at Long Island City's St. John's Hospital in Queens. For the first time, none of his relatives had been born in a medical facility. A minor but significant modification for a family of Italian immigrants who had always given birth at home. His parents were seeking a better life after moving from Italy. However, what they discovered in New York was perpetual poverty, and their Artoria flat was cramped, chilly, and had hardly any coal stoves, preserving their warmth. Food was never guaranteed, and Tony recalled afterwards that back then, there was no guarantee of a hot dinner. Tony's dad put in a lot of overtime. Ashley's health was precarious, although he was a grocer in Artoria. Years of work and hardship had left him without life insurance and with a severe heart ailment. The family suffered greatly from each defeat. The Benedettos' tenacity was well known to the neighbors, but they also observed how John's family was on the verge of disintegrating due to illness and the ongoing need for money. Tragic events occurred in 1936 when Tony was only 10 years old. Benedetto John passed away at the age of 50, leaving Tony's older sister Mary and Anna to take care of him alone, and John Jr., his brother. The city had already been abandoned by the Great Depression once. Additionally, the family's poverty had worsened. Anna got a job, working long hours as a seamstress in a sweatshop, creating piece after piece and low salary. Tony was always concerned about rent, and he remembered instances when their furniture was removed because they were unable to keep up with the rent. The landlord threatened to evict them payments. They started having soup kitchens every week. However, the loss of given how awful his father was, Tony developed empathy and humility that never abandoned him. Tony experienced something that year that demonstrated how his talent was outstanding. He was selected to sing at the age of 10. July 11, 1936, saw the Tribe Bridges opening. The $60 million bridge project that one of the city's greatest accomplishments was the connection of New York's 3 boroughs. A little child standing there, on a huge stone, he performed on stage in front of Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia himself. Later, the mayor even gave him a pat on the head. It was an instance when Tony never forgot. Evidence that his voice might lift him beyond the hardships of his everyday existence. He started working at the age of 13 in order to provide for his family. He started working as a singing waiter in Long Island City and Queens Italian eateries. Wearing a faded white jacket, he proceeded to serve pizza and pasta platters before performing for their clients. Even at that age, his voice was rich and controlled, and it quickly became a neighborhood's discussion. He was viewed by patrons as merely a gifted young man. In actuality, though, each note he sung contributed to putting milk and bread on the table at home. Later, Tony said that those eateries taught me more about people and music than any other place. The encounter molded his inherent conversation manner and instilled in him the value of humility in the face of adversity. Tony's early on, the artistic side was also evident. He was admitted to the Industrial School Art in Manhattan, a city renowned for developing budding painters' abilities and design. He had already established himself at PS 41 before high school, as the class caricaturist, using a keen eye to draw professors and students. At the Industrial Art School, he had aspirations of becoming a commercial artist. Encircled by imaginative vitality, and he developed his discipline and his passion for art in Manhattan. Later on adulthood, he acknowledged that those years had shaped both his approach to music and his painting. However, dreams have to wait. Tony left school at the age of 16 to support his family. He was hired by the Associated Press as a copyboy and then as a elevator operator and grocery store employee. Although the occupations didn't pay much, every dollar was important. He continued to sing despite the grind. He played amateur evenings in neighborhood theaters and clubs, stoking a passion that adversity was unable to quench. In 1944, Tony was drafted into the U.S. Army at the age of 18. He worked alongside in the last phases of World War II. The 63rd Infantry Division fought in Germany and France. He witnessed personally the brutality of the conflict. He sang with military bands when he could, providing consolation to soldiers who witnessed the atrocity. He was impacted by the Battle of the Bulge forever. Tony saw buddies among the nearly 19,000 American servicemen who were slain, villages burned and people killed. He recalled spending chilly evenings in foxholes and the ongoing worry that German forces might encircle them. These encounters made him a lifetime Rome of justice and peace. Following the war, Tony received the GI Bill. Opportunity to take music seriously. The American Theater Wing is where he enrolled. He received vocal coaching from Mimi Spear at the school. One piece of advice from her altered everything. She advised him to learn instead of copying vocalists taught from musicians. Motivated by jazz performers such as Art Tatum and Billie Holiday, Tony created it was his own style. The Greenwich Village smoky clubs in 1949 were full of melody. However, few could have predicted that a single little stage would initiate Amath Joe Borey, a stage name for Anthony Dominic Benedetto, was battling through sets night after night, in the hopes of a seemingly distant chance. Pearl Bailey then happened to enter the village by coincidence. She was already renowned for her strength and warmth, and she paid great attention to his singing. He stopped her cold with his emotion and wording. That night she made a choice that altered his course in life. He was asked to open her show, putting him in front of people who would eventually notice what she had noticed about him. It was more than just a gesture of goodwill, yet a daring move considering how polarized the post-war entertainment industry was. She didn't simply share her stage with Pearl Bailey, she introduced him to people through her contacts who made creation. The distinction that one night started a series of events that would eventually lead to Bob Hope into his way. Shortly after Bailey gave his okay, Bob Hope himself made a mistake. Bennett was singing when they entered a nightclub, one of America's most cherished and well-known performers, one man who can make or shatter careers. Later, Bennett recalled giving the performance his all without knowing who was watching. As soon as the set eventually, Hope took an uncommon action. He arrived backstage. Hope informed the youth, "You have something very special," said the vocalist. "I'll put you on my show." A few performers made this promise. Ever heard? For Bennett it was the turning point in his life. Hopefully invited him to kick off his next performance in New York's Paramount Theater, where legends like Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby had given a performance. For a new vocalist just starting out in village clubs, it seemed like entering the past directly. Hope made one more before making her Paramount debut. Recommendation: the name Joe Barr wouldn't work, he informed him. Anthony is his true name. The marquee could not accommodate Benedetto's length. Hope immediately made a suggestion: shorter, something that would stick in people's minds. Bennett, Tony. It was an easy shift, but one that was significant in a field where a name might have a significant impact. The new persona revealed doors. Later on, Bennett would claim that he owed the career and name it gave him. Bob Hope could do it. Late in 1949, the Paramount performances demonstrated that they were the real pivotal moment. The auditorium was packed with thousands of admirers, and Bennett had to swiftly learn how to deal with the types of crowds that used to trigger Sinatra uprisings. Although he acknowledged that it was frightening, he said that those evenings taught him how to command a room, pace himself, and manage a performance. Their record labels started to pay attention as his name became well-known nationwide. It wasn't long before Columbia Records signed with the label in 1950. Becoming a member of Themong, the top music stars. With producer Mitch Miller's help, Bennett developed his sound and Tony special. He once claimed that Miller had taught him to sing with unadulterated emotion by teaching him to concentrate on each note and phrase, not merely melody. Bennett was recording at Columbia's 7th Avenue studio, started a collaboration that would last for almost 60 years, resulting in the sale of 50 million records and more than 70 albums. Globally, Because of You, released in 1951, was the first significant development. After being released in April, it gradually rose up the rankings until July 14th, when it reached first place. For 10 weeks it remained there, an incredible run that turned Bennett into a well-known figure. More than 1 million copies of the song were sold, earning him a gold disc and putting him on TV and starting a hectic tour schedule. Audiences that were involved with its earnestness, and reviewers acknowledged Bennett's role in bringing the beloved pop song back to life. At a period when alternative styles were becoming popular, Bennett demonstrated that music might transcend barriers and bring people together. By bridging a cultural divide, listeners, Bennett then sang the song that would come to define him for decades in 1953. On October 24th, Rags to Riches shot to the top and remained there for 8 weeks. The spirit of post-war America was reflected in its triumphant and hopeful lyrics, and it became a hymn of the American ideal, welcomed by spectators. The single was sold more than 2 million copies, and years later it would be included in movies like The Godfather and Goodfellas, guaranteeing its position in the culture of the masses. According to Bennett, the song was most frequently even. Decades later, fans still ask for it. Bennett achieved a score a few could match the remarkable 24 singles in the top 40. Songs such as Blue Velvet, Just in Time, and Stranger in Paradise maintained him at the top of the charts each year. Even when American music was dominated by the Beatles, Bennett's When Joanna Loved Me continued to reach the top in 1964, demonstrating his resilience in the face of shifting waves. He described how he achieved success, saying that he enjoyed singing songs that people remembered was sufficient to maintain his dominance. Tony Bennett's collaborations with jazz greats were revolutionary. He abandoned the safe, polished pop sound that had been popular when he began recording with Count Basie in the middle of the 1950s. Made him well known. Stan's sessions were particularly audacious. Initially, Gatz was opposed to performing with a pop singer, but after hearing Bennett improvise through practice, the partnership with Jazz Messengers by Art Blakey startled even more of the music world. Blakey's strong bop style was seen by many as unsuitable. Bennett's voice was silky, however. When combined, they produced some of the most avant-garde jazz vocals of the time. Bobby, one of the best cornet players, Hackett, allegedly claimed that Bennett was the only pop singer who could not only sing over the band but also swing like an instrument. These initiatives weren't online experiments. They signaled a radical change that jeopardized his financial prosperity in the name of creativity. His album, The Beat of My Heart, was released in 1957. It was his method of escaping the pop music machine, despite Collier Records' warnings to the contrary. The jazz drumming luminaries Art Blakey, Chico Hamilton, and others were featured on the record, as well as Joe Jones, each contributing a unique sound. Live recordings of the sessions were made, capturing the authentic energy of jazz with hardly any Initially, critics rejected it as being too experimental, and just 50,000 were sold. Although it sold a lot of copies in the first year, its impact was much bigger. Lullaby on one track of Bennett dispersed with the band on Broadway, which is nearly unprecedented moment. Frank Sinatra later praised the CD and acknowledged that showed him how to swing. In 1958, just 1 year later, Bennett and Count Basie swings recording. Bennett sings. Basie first refused to do it, claiming that Bennett's powerful swinging band was too attractive for him. One was altered by that. When Bennett joined the orchestra that evening at Birdland in New York, he gave such a stirring rendition of Heavenly Pennies that left the entire club in disbelief. The recording of the album took place in just 3 days in January with a 16-piece band. Jeepers. The opener, Bennett traded riffs with the horn section in a light-hearted back and forth with Creepers Forward, which, according to business records, had never been tried. It was quite successful, selling almost 250,000 copies within the first year. Studio recordings made public years later showed that Bennett had created new tunes as the tape rolled and revised a lot of the vocal arrangements during the sessions. He acknowledged that he thought the singer was genuinely a member of his band on this album, which was the only one with vocals. Next came the tune that would come to define his career. On the 23rd of January 1962, in San Francisco, Bennett recorded I Left My Heart at 30th Street in Columbia. Studio. He had almost missed it. For 8 years, the song had been on his piano. He deemed it overly sentimental. Months later, he had laryngitis on the day of the session and was able to hardly talk. In order to accommodate his strained voice, the orchestra had to drop the pitch twice. However, he gave a performance in just 2 takes that transformed the song into past. The roughness in his voice that day contributed to its emotional depth. The Billboard Hot 100, the track peaked at number 19 and remained there. 36-week charts. It sold over 1 million copies by 1963 and his first gold record was earned. 2 Grammys were given to it, including the Record of the Year, a unique distinction for a song with jazz influences at the time. In 1969, it became the official theme music of San Francisco. However, the music industry quickly transformed, and along with it, Bennett's luck. A new era began in 1964 with the Beatles' arrival. Columbia Records forced Bennett to change as music took over the airways. He grudgingly released in 1970 Tony Sings Today's Greatest Tunes, including Beatles covers and airs. Visage was at odds with the trippy album cover. The project didn't work out. He acknowledged that he felt physically ill. Just videotape it. It was disregarded by rock lovers. It was despised by his devoted audience, and he between realms. He was abandoned. His once strong record sales plummeted. As his in a world that cried out for something fresh, sound was ignored. His private life was as tumultuous. Bennett married 19-year-old art student Patricia Beach in 1952. The wedding created a strange scene outside of New York's St. Patrick's Cathedral. 2,000 women wearing veils and black clothing were grieving as though they were at a funeral. To Sonstony in 1954 and Day in 1955 came shortly after. However, Bennett's ongoing travels, Patricia felt abandoned as a result, and after 13 years, they had split up by 1965. Of matrimony. When Patricia filed for divorce in 1969, the scandal grew more intense, mentioning the 4-year-old affair he had with actress Sandra Grant. When the divorce was finalized, Bennett wed Sandra in 1971, December of that year. The abrupt change startled his admirers, and his reputation as the clean-cut crooner was irrevocably changed. Items grew worse when, following a contentious argument, he quit Columbia Records in 1972. He ended a 20-year collaboration by refusing their requests for additional rock covers before choosing to launch his own company. He released just 2 albums while working briefly for MGM's Verve division. In 1975, Improv. Despite producing 5 albums, despite working with Bill Evans, the label failed by 1977 because of financial difficulties and inadequate distribution. Bennett was for the first time without contract for recording. His money fell apart after Improv collapsed, him with significant debt, and the kind of living he led in Los Angeles with Sandra was significantly more luxurious than his declining income could provide support. In 1977, the IRS threatened to confiscate his home over enormous amounts of overdue taxes. His mother, Anna, passed away that same year on. He was getting ready to perform at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco on Thanksgiving night. The loss was sent. Cocaine became his getaway after he fell into a severe depression. Sandra subsequently disclosed that he almost died from drug usage. By the late 70s, he had become a shadow of himself, making ends meet by performing at small concerts in Las Vegas. In 1979, Bennett came very near death. He overdosed on cocaine while struggling with addiction, grief, and debt. Bathing. Sandra discovered him unconscious in the overflowing tub before she hurried him to the hospital. She was able to revive him by performing chest compressions. Later, he explained describing the incident as a near-death encounter in which he saw a golden light that brought him serenity. Upon awakening, he experienced it was an indication of divine intervention and a second chance. It became the pivotal moment that drove him to fight for his comeback and completely stop using narcotics. Tony Bennett's career hit its lowest point in 1979 at 53. He almost drowned in debt and died from a drug overdose. He owes $2 million in overdue taxes to the IRS, who threatened to seize his property. "Look, I'm lost," he said in a desperate call to his sons Danny and Day. "In this place, people don't appear interested in listening to my music." What caused the fact that Danny and Day had been in a failing rock band was what made the call so unexpected. Quacky Duck and his friends from the farm. They were the last on paper. Who would you think would save a legendary singer? However, Danny soon discovered that even if he lacked his father was talented, he had a keen business sense, and he had a voice for music, but lacked sound financial judgment. Danny started reducing spending right away, and relocated Tony to New York once more. That choice would serve as the foundation of one of the biggest comebacks in the history of entertainment. DY's strategy for his father's profession was audacious and unexpected. Rather than following fads, he relocated Tony away from the lost. The image of Vegas has grown stale. In order to reach younger audiences, he booked him at local theaters and colleges. Had never witnessed a live performance of American standards. In 1986, Danny introduced Drodering to Columbia Records, the label that had released him in 1971, his father. However, Tony was in complete creative control this time. The initial album from this agreement, his first charting album since 1972, was The Art of Excellence. Additionally, Danny arranged partnerships with unexpected parties, such as rock bands, such as the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who were able to reach completely new audiences.